You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
Hey now, what's happening, Max?
You know, just living the dream on a overnight Saturday afternoon.
It's okay. It's okay. A lot to get to today. Let's jump right in. We can't be focusing on your weekend work every episode. Did you know that Charles Lindbergh on Wednesday, May 20th, which was yesterday, set off in a single-engine tail dragger with no front window using a periscope at 85% over the normal maximum operating weight of a Ryan M2 and flew non-stop from New York to Paris, landing 33 hours and 20 minutes later.
That's incredible. Just wrap your head around that, everyone.
The periscope. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's crazy. I got to read a book on that. I haven't done enough study on that.
You know what I don't know a ton about is the kidnapping of the Lindbergh kids.
I know of it. I just don't know.
Yeah.
That's about it. Sometimes I do read these aviation books, though, from back in the day, like about flying the Pan Am Clippers across the Pacific at low altitude and all this weather and stuff. And I read this really interesting one where they were out on a trip in the Pacific and they had to take the long way back around the world because of World War II breaking out.
Oh, yeah.
And they were just like landing on the rivers and trying to get 50-gallon drums of fuel and pumping. It's crazy. So.
And you already read it?
Yeah, those were the real aviators back then with radial engines and sextants, not
periscopes.
With crew bunks and GPS and CPDLC.
And then, like 90 years ago, Amelia Earhart took off from Newfoundland to become the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. She ended up landing in Northern Ireland instead of France due to weather, but man, May is a big month for aviation.
Big aviation month. Thank you for awareness, Dylan.
Well, I actually need to thank my dad who sends me these like this day in history aviation stuff whenever he sees one. He's like, you should add that to the show. So I did. Thanks, Pop.
Super fan.
That's our new segment. Yeah. Brought to you by our 21.5 Apostle. Actually, he just did a trip the other day. My dad's a big surfer. He went to the surf park in Waco, Texas, where you can they have these like legit waves. And he said, he just did a quick trip out there and he goes, I got you 2 new listeners on the last trip. It's perfect. So if you were operating a flight out of Dallas or Phoenix and some guy told you to listen to a podcast, welcome. We'll send you some stickers. Just shoot us an email. All right. A lot's been brewing, especially in the age 68 arena. Have you seen some of the emails from the unions on this?
I haven't heard what's going on. Nobody ever talks about it at work. It's weird.
It's weird. Oh, man. I'm trying to think. Were you at the Airlines when age 65 went through? Or was that before your time? I got to look that up. 2007, I was at the Airlines. I remember that was a pretty controversial, and it looks like this one's going to be pretty controversial as well. Our friends at ALPA have come out against age 68. I've seen APA, which is the Union for American Airlines, come out against it. I think SWAPA's still trying to figure it out. Are they polling their members, I think, to try and figure out?
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of surprised that they came out so quickly against it because I know it's taken time. They're gathering data. There's a poll that was open, and we haven't even released the results of the poll yet. So, because I would think you would have to get what the majority opinion was of the group before you took an official stance, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing that's going on right now is Republic Airlines, which is a commuter, is trying to get a waiver on the 1,500-hour rule, trying to get it down to 1,000 or 1,200 hours for their students in their ab initio program. So I think it's the typical, like, don't let a good crisis go to waste, you know? Like, if there's a boogeyman right now, this is the time to change the law. The 68, it's funny now that we have looked at the age 65 thing and how it's aged. The problem is that you talk to 3 guys and you're going to get 3 different opinions, or 3 gals.
Yeah, depending on where they're at in their career, obviously. I mean, I'm fine with a guy who's 60 and he's all for it. But then there's other guys that are that age that are like, even if they pass it, I'm retiring anyway at 65. Like, that's been my plan. That's what I'm doing. But it just depends on everyone's financial situation and seniority level and everything else. I'm very interested to see our poll. I would wish the other unions would release like what the numbers say, because I would be very interested to see what the actual, there's got to be a majority. It can't be split, I don't think. I mean, you have roughly half captains, half FOs, right? Obviously, if you're a junior captain, that this is going to stymie your progression. If you're a senior captain, you just get the option to be able to
make a bunch the top end of your earning scale.
So it's interesting.
Yeah. The other thing, I read some comments online of people's thoughts, and one guy says that his carrier, the average retirement age is 62 and a half right now. So they're not.
Is that
some people
voluntary though, or by medical?
I'm not sure. He just said the average age.
I don't hear very many people retiring early voluntarily, but who knows?
Yeah.
I just don't know the data.
The problem is that the way the seniority system works is it's going to be very difficult to walk away from those last 3 years when they're going to be your highest income earning years.
Until we've had several captains die this year that were flying, like freak stuff or people get cancer. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So you look around and you're like, okay, do I have enough money to retire? Like, am I going to keep doing this?
Yeah.
And I think the airlines have to look at it too. It's like, okay, so now people are looking at, this is just an extra couple years of gravy. And I would have to assume that those pilots at that stage become less productive, right? And wanting to drop and fly part-time and do all this stuff, which I don't know how that works out either for the airlines from a cost standpoint. So
exactly. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Love to hear what the listeners think. Age 68. One last thing on the business aviation side, I've heard part of the shortage in business aviation will be filled by retiring airline pilots. Well, you'd have to imagine if the age goes up to 68, that would mean there's less retiring airline pilots that would be making that jump, would be my guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's a good point.
Interesting. So let us know what you think. info@215podcast.com. We'll be monitoring this. Let us know when you see that poll result, Max. Very interesting. So, all right. We finalized the design for the new hat. That's going to be going into the manufacturer on Monday. So
very exciting.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. We'll reveal that once it's available. And then you can make a donation on our website to support the show and get yourself a new cap. And if you'd like to get some stickers in the meantime, you can just write us a review on Apple or Spotify. We've got a couple new reviews, Max, if you want to read them for us.
Sure. From Matula Flies, not just for professional pilots. Dylan and Max continue to provide great content. I really enjoyed episode 66, Flying for the Fractionals, and episode 75, Loss of Control in Flight. I appreciate the consistent format and the relevant content. Keep up the good work. And Dust Off Pat says, has Siri been telling you what I'm doing? I've been listening to every episode since the first back in early 2019. Haven't missed one yet. By far the best aviation podcast out there. Also, it's almost a little eerie how your podcast seemed to track my career progression. I was that military rotor guy trying to build enough airplane time to move to the 121 world back when you guys started. A little over a year ago, I was prepping for an interview at F9, which is Frontier, when you released your episode talking about them as a career destination. I just finished your last 2 episodes on my run today, and they were both very relevant as I've flown the extra with APS and know firsthand how incredible the training is. After spending some time on the phone with James O'Neill, I'm now at a legacy carrier and seriously contemplating if it's the right place for me or if I'm just following everyone else's dream. I'm really looking forward to an interview with someone that decided the 121 world wasn't for them. Keep up the great work, guys.
Ooh, we've got to have a lot of relevant content for that guy then.
Yeah, right?
Thanks to Dust Off Pat for that. So if you wrote a review, just shoot us an email and let us know your mailing address, and I will shoot you some stickers. And thanks for repping the show. Appreciate it. All right, Max. Last episode, we complained there was nothing in the mailbag, and now we went from rags to riches. We have...
When it rains, it pours.
Exactly. Tons of emails to read. We're not going to be able to get to them all, unfortunately, today, but we'll save some for the next episode. What I can tell you is that the topic of, wait, do I need to go to the airlines because everyone else is? That rang true for a lot of folks. So we'll read a few of those messages from our listeners. But before we do that, we should mention that the mailbag is brought to you by our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy. You can visit their website at aircrewacademy.com. They just put a blog post up about mitigating pain at the pump. That's one thing you don't have to worry about on the 121 side, I guess, indirectly. It's pretty crazy, though, for us. It used to be like Boston and Dulles were the ones you'd look at and you'd be like, oh my gosh, fuel's $9 a gallon there. And now it's like, pretty much everywhere is $9 a gallon. Side note, the Atlantic Awards, it's just by gallons, right? It's not by dollar cost.
That's a good question. I think that's correct.
I guess when it's good, it's good. And when it's bad, it's bad.
Yeah,
no,
right.
It's too bad. Well, everyone's making all these pilot shortage petitions. Maybe we need to make a petition to change the Atlantic bucks to dollars spent. Anyways, the blog
Any
post
more
says,
savings bonds. Or no, that's Avfuel.
Avfuel, yeah. Shout out Avfuel. Yeah. The blog goes on to say, as jet fuel costs are now reaching $10 a gallon in some places, I would say a lot of places, they can now account for almost 40% of an operator's budget. What can we do to mitigate the financial damage? I mean, they have
just stop flying. It's the same way you mitigate the risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Park the jet.
It's perfect.
You could really look at long-range crews and doing things to make yourself more efficient.
That's actually one of the items they meant, pulling it back to a longer range cruise, reducing your burn, tankering.
Make sure you consider the effects of your engine program too,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I know for a lot of airplanes, it's better to fly faster.
Right, burn the extra gas to keep the hourlies down. But
yep. So interesting on that. Tankering is another thing. You know, we've been tankering more than we used. We used to never tanker, and now we have been tankering quite a bit more.
Of course not. Why would you?
Why would we?
Wholesale for gas. Why would you? That's what it seems.
And alternate airports, they mentioned, was another thing to look at. I'll tell you what we have done is alternate FBOs. There's a couple airports where we go to the FBO because it's more convenient for our passengers, but the fuel price is higher. And lately, we have been changing that policy. Well, it's interesting because I think we need to do a whole episode on this, but if you're in business aviation, you probably know what CAA is. CAA, I wonder what's going to happen there because of the consolidation of FBOs and more monopolies. I'm kind of worried that CAA is going to get squeezed out a little bit. Some airports, I've already seen it. So that's probably a whole topic we could tackle.
But that being said, a lot of these big FBO conglomerates are also CAA carriers.
Some of them, but like Atlantic isn't.
Right.
Anyways, great stuff in the blog post from our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy, aircrewacademy.com. Check out all of the offerings they have for your flight department to keep everyone educated and safe. Okay, on to the mailbag. Go ahead. Email number 1.
Dude, love the discussion on the latest pod. Way to be vulnerable. That's why we are good for BizAv. Humility. Max was right. Hard landings. Read it. I was at AA in 2000, living the dream. Epic new airline contracts at United and Delta. Then market tanks and 9/11 happens. I end up in a crash pad with 8 beds in Kew Gardens, Queens, New York, with a bathtub that was blacker than coal.
Oh.
Disgusting place. 0 QOL. 6 on, 1 off, commuting back to Florida. No thanks. Every one of my buddies at Delta and United got their contracts abrogated, and the PBGC took all of the pensions. It may seem like it's the golden job, but the grind of the first several years sucks, especially if you commute, and then it starts over again once you upgrade. So that's just my note. Yeah. Who's to say what the right decision is? How do you measure that? Money after a long career? No furloughs? Adventures? Who knows? You'll be fine in this industry. Keep at it. Blue skies, my friend. Jamie.
Appreciate it, Jamie. He sent me a text after he listened to that message, and it was awesome to hear from him and get his perspective. I thought it was worth sharing with the rest of the folks. Here's another text I got from somebody. Hey, Dylan, just listened to your latest episode. Excellent podcast. I'm in the interview queue for Delta. Tossed my app out there and they bit. And your thoughts mirror very closely to my own. I'm going to see it through to the potential CJO. But as Max says, I don't need to decide until the decision needs to be made. Won't be an easy decision. Hearing your perspectives are very helpful in maintaining my sanity. That's from R. You're like a philosopher, Max. I think.
I know. Am I going to get a coffee tale quote book pretty soon?
I think you're pretty much there. It's amazing. There's going to be a bust of your head with the quote in front of the training center.
I don't think I have any more, though, after that. Do I?
No, I think that's it.
Dylan, this brings up another one of my favorite quotes that says, money is not the prime asset. Time is.
Exactly.
And that mirrors your decision.
Now we just got to figure out a good tool to value your time. That's what's really needed. All right, this is a long one, but I think it's a good read. It says 21.5 on your last episode, you discussed Dylan's business aviation versus airline dilemma, and it rang true with me. I too battle this multiple times a month, though I'm not in business charter or airline aviation. After 14 years in the Marine Corps as a F-18 Sky Pilot and a T-45 flight instructor, I debated what was for me when I left active duty. In the ready room, the typical banter between the active duty folks and the reservists, who mostly all flew for the airline cargo company, was, how's life at XYZ airline? What kind of money am I looking at? I dropped this trip and picked up that trip, and I'm going to be gone a few extra days, but made tons of money. I'm sure you can imagine the different conversations. For some reason, when I considered this post-active duty career, I could never see myself as an airline cargo flyer. But after 4 years of this incessant chatter, I started to buy into it, started to get my apps together, and even broke the ear off of one of your diamond dogs looking for advice. For some reason, though, and mainly due to a great conversation with my wife, when I got to the end, I pursued the road less traveled and went to the general aviation path. I guess I reasoned with myself that I thought I'd make a bigger impact in this world trying to teach rich people how not to kill themselves in their fancy new airplanes than they buy from my company. And I also like the prospect of being home mostly every night. But as you both mentioned, there is no perfect job out there. And even though all my airline buddies would probably suggest otherwise and say I'm crazy to pass up on the airline/cargo gig, well, they still think I'm crazy as one of those nasty reservists in the ready room now. Every time I'm back in the squadron, listening to their nonstop airline this, cargo that banter, they eventually bring me into the conversation, probably for sympathy or perhaps comedic relief, because we all know my paycheck doesn't, or at least won't, come close to theirs. I admit every time I'm in that ready room, the FOMO hits hard and I start to wonder if I made the right decision. I wouldn't say I'm young, so that idea of enjoying the ride and trying out those crazy career opportunities like you guys mentioned may not apply, but I'm certainly not old, except for the now crazy old man eyebrows my wife constantly points out to me. And I kind of feel like I'm walking that crazy fun aviation path rather than taking the well-worn road. I have no idea where it leads. But for the time being, I'm paid pretty darn well for being a flight instructor. I'm home mostly every night. My employer truly cares about me and doesn't know me by a seniority number. We've got a pretty sweet gig where I get to meet some really interesting personalities of these richer than me folk that can buy an awesome plane, and I get to break it up monthly with a sweet trip to go fly inverted and remember how awesome I thought I was as a fighter pilot. The FOMO is real, but if it's any consolation, the FOMO is also real on the other side, because no matter how much my reservist peers act perplexed at my funky path, they also act super jealous when I tell them my day-to-day job. They're just not jealous about the paycheck, but it all depends on what your currency is. Mine is time with my family and enjoying what I do. Now I just remind me of this in 6 months. Thanks for keeping it real on your podcast. Thanks for taking the time to put together such a great content, since I know that must take tons of time. And thanks for the banter. See you on guard. And that's from Roger Wilco.
Just for the record, being a fire pilot qualifies for doing something cool in your aviation career. Just want to throw that out there real quick.
Max does approve
that
of
works.
that. Yeah,
we approve of that.
You're good. He sums it up right here when he says, but it all depends on what your currency is. I spend time with my family enjoying what I do. That's it. And that's why there is no right answer. It's just what you value, you know? So I'm glad that episode helped some folks. And we got some more emails regarding that topic we'll cover in a later episode. Thanks to everyone that took the time to write in and share their perspective. FOMO is real. It's hard. It's easy when the dollars are easy to quantify. And pilots love to talk about money.
All right, flight advice brought to you by our friends at Harvey Watt, the largest provider of aviation loss of license insurance. If you don't have it, you need it. HarveyWatt.com. So last week I was complaining about how we give this advice and then we never hear any follow-up. So now the advice we gave just recently, he gave us follow-up. So it says some mini updates. So just for those of you that didn't listen to it, shame on you. But this is a guy that was in an interesting situation, and the boss offered to buy him a time-building airplane so he could keep flying, and he's going to fly Cirrus, and he was going to buy a Citation, blah, blah. So anyway, if you haven't listened to it, go back. But he says, some mini updates. We talked more yesterday, and the boss says to skip the $75,000 time builder and just fly the pants off the Cirrus.
Ooh.
That's kind of what I was thinking when I first read the email.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
But even when we had to put a new engine in it and had about 600 hours left on it, it'll be cheaper than a whole different aircraft anyway. He told me to fly with friends, family, solo, whenever I want. While he planned for me to fly a Citation single pilot, don't worry. While he and I both don't know what we don't know, I knew that's not going to happen for some time. He still wants to put me through initial PIC type rating in the actual aircraft once it gets delivered. It's getting a new glass panel installed at the moment. We plan to find an experienced right seater, preferably an instructor, so we can both log the time. He also wants to buy a Vision jet sooner than later, and we're looking into transitioning from the SR-20 to a 22, hopefully sooner too. Safety and compliance is my main concern, though, and so far so good. Everything's on the up and up, and I plan to keep it that way. I'll keep you updated on where it ends up. So that's awesome.
Good update.
Sounds like he's sticking it out and things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah. My only advice here on this, for your initial PIC type rating, I would not do it in the airplane. If you can get it in the simulator, I would definitely do that. Sounds like they're doing some type of avionics package, so the sim might not match the airplane. But I think especially for your first turbine airplane, probably your first like real training event, I would go to the sim so you can learn from the mistakes that you're going to make and see the real thing.
When you're learning, and especially initially, and you screw something up, you can pause it and go back and try it again.
Yeah.
In the airplane, especially with gas too. I would think that if there's some sort of cost advantage, it can't be a ton. But I think also I've done training and check rides in the real airplane before, in a jet, like 135 check and the training for that. It is really cool to do and really valuable training to do in the actual airplane too, in the real non-simulated ATC environment and all of that stuff, right? So,
oh yeah,
I think that would be good. But like you said, for recurrent or later on,
my advice would be go to the sim for the initial PIC. It's probably different avionics. Then when you actually go fly the airplane, have an instructor that can check you out on the avionics package and go fly them. Do both, really. That would be my advice. So cool. Thanks for the update on that. Appreciate it.
All right. So next, this is a gentleman that reached out to me via LinkedIn, John, and he is another one of those that has an aviation career we've all heard about, but none of us really know anything about it. So he, kind of like Ken, the crop duster, or John is a law enforcement pilot. He flies fixed wing, rotorcraft, does all kinds of stuff. And we had a really good talk with him that turned out to be super interesting. Check it out. Here's John.
Here's a ton of great stories with John.
He thinks we were going to like pick a couple of them, but
no,
we're just going to play them all, right?
Okay. Oh, yeah.
All right, here's John. Well, Dylan, on the show today, we have John, who is an aviator, a fan of the show, longtime fan of the show.
Oh,
actually, from the beginning when we were really terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And John has an interesting job in aviation, one that we all know exists, but I think very few of us know much about. And he is in law enforcement aviation. So, John, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, guys. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I feel like I've met my heroes here. I've been following you guys since you started, so you've helped me pass many drives down the road. So I'm excited to be here.
Listen, maybe next time we'll get James O'Neill on and really blow the top off.
We're like a fine wine, hopefully.
You can see his turtleneck in our that he's usually donning.
That's awesome.
Incredible.
So, John, law enforcement pilot, are you fixed wing, rotor wing? Give us the basics. Tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
So my agency, all the pilots are dual rated. We fly both helicopters and fixed wing. Probably about an 80-20 mix at my particular base that I'm assigned at, 80% helicopters and 20% fixed wing. On the fixed wing side of the house, we fly pretty nice Cessna 206s they got the whole G1000 turbo package. And we've got the big infrared camera on the side of the helicopter. The big brother is watching camera, if you will. It's pretty sweet. It's got ultra high def zoom on it, so we can go to some pretty crazy altitudes and zoom in and read some good information that we need to get. Let's just leave it that way.
License plates.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes we can see how many fingers or finger that a person is holding up.
Wow.
Depending on how friendly they are. But anyway, we use the fixed wing mostly for surveillance, some transport stuff. But the 206 is a great platform for us. Our particular 206, we ordered them with the extended range tanks, which is super crazy. The loiter time on that thing is like 6 to 7 hours. Obviously, a whole lot longer than my bladder loiter time. So, but our ground guys really like it. It gives them a lot of good intel. Plus, with the fixed wing side, nobody pays attention to a high wing single engine plane flying around in the sky. Put a helicopter up there and everybody looks up to say, "Oh, there's a helicopter."
Yeah, it's a lot more synonymous with the law, I think, than a small.
Yeah,
it is. That's exactly right. But yeah, so that's what we use the fixed wing side mostly for. And we'll do some transports. We don't do any prisoner transports with airplanes because space constraints. It's just a safety issue for us. So, but we will take some of our investigators maybe to neighboring states to conduct interviews. And of course, we use the fixed wing when we're transporting our helicopters for maintenance and that type of thing to follow the helicopter so that we can pick up the pilot as they drop it off. Because sometimes our maintenance places are a couple hours away flight time wise. So that's the big mission for the fixed wing. And then on the helicopter side of the house, our particular agency, we fly a couple different platforms. We fly both Bell and Eurocopter, which Eurocopter is now Airbus. Airbus bought Eurocopter out a few years ago. But we have a single engine Bell 407, which we use primarily for law enforcement. They're equipped with infrared cameras. We've got the 30 million candle power night sun on the front of them. And we've also got hoists on the outside of all our helicopters. And then we're also NVG on all our helicopters. So our helicopters are NVG compatible and all the pilots are trained on night vision goggles. That's pretty cool stuff. But like I said, we use the single engine helicopters mostly for law enforcement support. We go out for searches. To some people we search for want to be found. Some people we search for don't want to be found. So it just depends. We'll do governor transports, VIP transports type of stuff. So we're responsible for toting the governor around the state whenever he needs to conduct official business. And then, like I said, we have hoists on all our helicopters. So we do remote area rescues with those. So don't do a whole lot of that in our particular area, but just a few times a year, we'll get a call for maybe a hunter that's fallen out of a tree and broke his leg. And it's going to be half a day to get him out by ground. So we can go in with the helicopter, send a rescuer down, pick him up, and then get him to the hospital pretty quick. And we've done some flood type situations too, where we do rescues in flood waters and all that. And then we also fly twin engine helicopters. We've got one Bell 412 that we fly, which is the 412 is the old Huey. The 412 is the new version of that. And it's a really good platform. It's a large helicopter. And then we also fly a Eurocopter, or the Airbus EC-145, which is a twin engine, single pilot airplane. Both of those platforms are single pilot IFR, and all our pilots are instrument rated. So it uses the instrument capabilities. Both of those aircraft are very capable as far as the instrument platform goes, very stable platforms, and the autopilot is just phenomenal on those things. As a matter of fact, one really cool feature of the autopilot on the Airbus in particular is it has what we call an auto level feature. So you can couple the thing up to, say, an ILS or a LPV approach. It'll come down and fly right through minimums if you needed to in an emergency situation. And at 50 feet off the radar altimeter, it'll do an auto level. And it just flies down the runway at 50 feet AGL until you either hit the go around button or you disconnect the autopilot and land. So figure if I can't see the runway from 50 feet, it's a really bad day.
Wow.
But yeah, and we do Medevac in the twin engine helicopters. That's our big mission that we have at our base. So in the Medevac role, we do single pilot, of course, and then we also have nurses and medics on the aircraft. And the nurses and medics are provided by, in our case, a local trauma system that provides the nurses and medics. So it's kind of a cooperative agreement, if you will, between my agency and then the local hospital, where we provide the pilots, the aircraft, the hangar facility, and then the local hospital provides the nurses and medics and the majority of the medical supplies. We do primarily what we call scene work or scene calls, and that's like your car wrecks, your industrial accidents, hunting accidents. We do very little hospital transfers, if you will. Say somebody's at hospital A and they need to get to a better hospital B. We do some of that, but only if we're not tied up on the scene calls, because that's kind of our bread and butter, is the trying to get to the guy that's laying in the ditch that doesn't have any help.
Mm-hmm.
That's our mission, is what we're there for.
So like out west here, most of that kind of stuff is subcontracted out, I know. Is that common for you guys to be doing the Medevac stuff around the country, or is it kind of different in different parts of the country?
No, there's only a handful of states that do Medevac service, Maryland being the primary one. Maryland actually pretty well started Medevac in the country with their program, Maryland State Police. We do it in our state. My agency has a couple of Medevac bases, and then we're supplemented with commercial providers. So that would be like your Air Methods or your MedTrans folks. And so kind of compete, yeah, but at the same time, those folks are really more interested in your hospital type interfacility versus trauma work is hit or miss for those guys, because sometimes folks have insurance, sometimes they don't. So, but most of the time, folks in the hospital, they have the insurance. And of course, obviously it's a business for them. Whereas with us, we're a state funded agency. We don't really have a bottom line. So if we run out of money, we just raise taxes. So,
But what about on the law enforcement side? So is there somebody that's operating the sensors? And obviously there's got to be somebody operating the hoist, but are you flying solo often, or do you always have another crew member?
Oh, no. So our 206s are set up. We're single pilot, but then we'll take a trooper. We'll train them in the use of the camera and our FLIR systems. And then in the back of the 206 typically has your club seating arrangement in the back. So we pulled all that out. And where your rear facing seats are is we have a camera operator station, if you will. We have two large computer screens. We have a keyboard. Basically looks like a Nintendo joystick, to be honest with you. But they have all that. The two screens, they usually split them. One screen will have like the infrared camera image or the daytime image, and the other screen is a moving map type image. So if they have a situation where, hey, we've found somebody, and they can identify the house and say, this is the address where somebody's behind 123 Maple Street. So the pilot is just there. Now, one thing we can do is we have the ability with the G1000, we can actually take what our camera operator is seeing on their screen and we can put it on one of our G1000 screens, which is pretty cool. So we can split screen so that left side of the G1000 is all your nav display and all that stuff, and then the right side is just what the guys in the back are seeing. So it kind of helps to work in conjunction, because a lot of times those guys will see something. They'll say, "Hey, I've got a target down here low to the left," and so the pilot can then kind of glance at his screen and say, "Okay, I see what you're looking at," and he can modify his orbits to make sure that he keeps whatever the target is in sight.
I gotcha. We're going to mark this right now. It sounds like Max is getting a call from Southwest. So we'll give him a second. So be honest, have you ever done a flyby of a drive-in movie and then had them zoom in, and then you could watch a little bit of the movie on the G1000? That'd be... No?
It's funny you should say that. There is a drive-in theater like less than a quarter mile off the end of the approach end of our runway at our airport.
Perfect.
So all the time when we're coming in there at night, we're like looking over, what he's playing? Oh, that's Peter Pan, or Spider-Man.
I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. So John, let's talk a little bit about the path to get into law enforcement flying. For many of our listeners, they're already pilots. Can you just go down to the local police station and say, "Hey, I'd like to fly for you"? Or do you have to become an officer first? Talk about what that typical path looks like to get into law enforcement flying.
Sure. So my particular agency has two different paths to get to. We call it the Aviation Division. Most of our guys were troopers first on the road. So they started out as troopers, and then they have to work a minimum of 2 years as a trooper working the highways. And then once they work the 2 years, then they're eligible to apply. So when I got hired, the minimum was you had to have a private airplane rating. They've since relaxed that a little bit because they're having trouble getting a lot of qualified applicants, because it obviously takes a pretty good coin to get your private airplane rating. A trooper making whatever those guys are making starting out with a wife and a kid, that's a little bit more difficult. So they've lowered the threshold to where now they have to at least have soloed and have their private written taken. And if they do that, then it shows the aptitude they can actually probably do this. And then they're eligible to apply. Obviously, the more ratings you have, the more competitive you would be. So like when I applied 20 years ago, I had already had commercial instrument on the fixed wing side of the house. So that when they pick a trooper up, they give them whatever ratings they lack, they will provide that. So let's say they pick a trooper up that has a private airplane rating. Well, they'll give him instrument and commercial airplane, and then they'll give him all the add-ons for the helicopter. So they'll get commercial instrument add-on helicopter, and then they get aircraft-specific training. So they'll go to Texas for Bell 407 school. They'll go back to Texas for Eurocopter school. They'll go back to Texas again for NVG school. And it doesn't all happen immediately, but as they progress in their experience level, then they kind of step them up into the larger aircraft or the more kind of dangerous missions, such as the nighttime searches and off airport landings at night, if you will. So that's the primary way we get pilots. Like I said, we call it grow our own, if you will. The alternate method, if they get in a position where they have several vacancies at one time and they really need somebody, they will hire outside of the department of what we call a civilian pilot. And in order to be hired as a civilian pilot, you have to have a minimum of 1,000 hours turbine helicopter time. So we're usually getting those guys either out of the military or maybe guys that are flying in the Gulf doing the oil rig offshore stuff. They'll come and apply to work for us. But it's still a pretty good deal because they'll hire a guy that say is a commercial instrument rated helicopter guy. They'll give him all the fixed wing stuff. And so he'll get some ratings, and plus he'll get all the training on our aircraft as well. That's the two pathways to get in. To be honest, they prefer to grow their own because over the years they've had better success with, hey, if we pick a guy off the road that's got a couple years invested in the department, he's more than likely going to stay for a career. Versus a guy that's already got all his ratings, he may just be looking for a job to get him to the next job. So, but we have had some civilian guys stick around for a while, but like I said, it all depends. But the preference is to kind of grow your own.
And if you're a civilian guy or gal pilot, will you become a trooper? Do you become a trooper, or are you just strictly a pilot? How does that work?
They generally give them the option to become a trooper. So once they're hired, obviously, because we have a need for a pilot.
Yeah.
And so what they tell them is, look, at some point in time down the road, when our staffing allows us to do it, we'll let you go to be a trooper. And that our trooper school is 6 months long. So we lose that pilot for 6 to 8 months while they're doing all their trooper school and then their field training. And so then once they get done with all that, then they come right back in the aviation division as a trooper pilot, if you will. A lot of our civilians have done that, the ones that want to stick around, because it's better benefit. You get to carry a gun and a badge, you get a take-home car, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we have had some guys do that as well.
How much does having experience as a trooper translate when you're flying?
It's tremendous. We get a lot of searches, like I joked about hunting for people that don't want to be found. Well, we get a lot of searches like they get a pursuit, for example, and the guy bails and takes off on foot, or we got a fleeing convict or whatever. It's huge to know what the guy on the ground is thinking. Because you were a trooper on the road, you were in his shoes at one time. So you know kind of what he's thinking. Where's this guy possibly going to run to? You also know kind of what the sensitivity is when we get a canine on site, because we like to work in conjunction with a canine, because generally the helicopters serve to kind of suppress the fleeing subject. If the helicopter's overhead, he's not going to be as apt to get up and run, right? So he kind of hunkers down. Well, that really helps the canine, because then the canine can catch up to him and kind of puts a twofold pressure on somebody that we're trying to capture. But yeah, having that experience is tremendous from when you're doing the searches like that.
Do you see law enforcement evolving towards drones to replace parts of what you guys do with helicopters and stuff? Or do you think that there's not really a way to do that with?
Oh, no, the drones definitely have a role. This is kind of funny. We have drones in our department, but they are not part of the aviation division. They are kind of with our criminal technology guys, if you will. They've kind of adapted the drones. Of course, the limitation to the drones right now is just the loiter time. They don't have a whole lot of time on station before they have to come back and recharge their batteries or change their batteries. And it's limited as far as what they can see. The big thing with a helicopter that we hear a lot is called a force multiplier. When people hear a helicopter, even on our searches, you'd be surprised when we go out searching for somebody, everybody hears it and they come out of their houses and they start, what's going on? They start looking in their backyards. We got a phone call from this lady down the street. She says that she saw a guy running through the woods. So then we head down there. That's probably our guy then. And with a drone, you don't get that kind of acknowledgement from all the folks in the community. So just the presence of the helicopter, especially like back in 2020 when we had a lot of riots and unrest going on, just the presence of the helicopter overhead a lot of times would help keep down the violence, if you will, because they saw the helicopter. They were probably less apt to say, well, maybe if I throw this bottle, they might get me on video with the helicopter. And then, drones definitely have a role, but I don't think in my lifetime I'll see it replace a helicopter. But yeah, they definitely have a role to supplement, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't really considered that fact, but when you were saying that, I remember when we had a helicopter, you hear it over your head and you pull out your phone, you look on the news, you see what's going on.
We just had one orbiting our neighborhood not that long ago, and all the neighbors are texting, what's going on? And everybody's Googling, like trying to figure, you're exactly right.
What percentage of the time would you say when you do that and you look for somebody that somebody calls in and like, that's like integral to finding somebody?
It depends on the area. So like, the area that I'm in is pretty rural. Sometimes we go out in the mountains and obviously there's not many people, but if we're in a more populated area, it's probably like 70% of the time we're getting calls from, hey, I know y'all are looking for this dude. I just saw a guy running. So yeah, if we're in kind of a more city town kind of a setting, yeah, we get them all the time.
Right now, I'm currently sitting on reserve. My phone's here, but there's just nothing going on. Like I went on duty at 3 a.m. today and it's currently 8:45 where I live and nothing going on. Does that happen often in the law enforcement where there's just not much going on, so you just kind of hang out?
How does the shifts work? Let's talk a little bit about how it's structured.
The way our shifts work, and you guys will probably be really surprised at this, we work a 24-hour shift, just like a fireman. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. People say all the time, well, truck drivers can only drive like 10 hours. How is it you can work a 24-hour shift? So what our agency does is we work a 24-hour shift. So we'll come in at 8 in the morning and stay till 8 the next morning. During that 24-hour shift, we're going to average probably three requests for service, which each request probably averages about 2 hours. So you're looking at about what we call 6 hours of duty time, which duty time we define as time outside the hangar. So when we're at the hangar, we're hanging out. We've got bedrooms, living room. We got a workout center. So the guys, once they come in, they do their pre-flight, they're ready to go. They just sit back and chill. They might watch Netflix, they might take a nap, they might work out. But when they respond to a call, then that's considered their duty time. And we put limits on their duty time. So like they can only work 10 hours of duty time in a 24-hour period. And that is extendable to 12 if they get like kind of, hey, I got my last call here and I need to get back to base. So we'll allow them to extend it to 12. But what generally happens is if they get close to that 10 hours of duty time, they'll call their supervisor and say, hey, I'm at 9 hours of duty time, just to let you know. And then there's always a kind of a backup guy, if you will, in reserve. And so we'll call the backup guy to say, hey, Joe's getting ready to time out. I need you to come in and relieve him so he can go home. So, but that's kind of the way it works. So we always have a pilot at the hangar 24/7. And we also have a pilot that's in a on-call status. And so we're different than the airlines. We don't say you have to be there in 2 hours. We define it as a reasonable response time. So, and most guys are usually there in less than 2 hours. I mean, most of the guys live pretty close. So, and they'll probably get a pretty good heads up before they have to come in.
And so you said one pilot, is that one for fixed wing and one's for rotor, or just one total?
Nope, just one pilot will be there. So the pilot that's there is going to be primarily the helicopter guy. He's the medevac guy. He's the search and rescue guy. Let's say that during the course of the day, we've got the pilot that's there and he's the medevac helicopter guy. And we get a call for the airplane, for example. Then we would call the on-call guy to come in to handle that flight and say, hey, we need you to come in and take the airplane to such and such a location for this mission. And so a lot of times the airplane stuff is scheduled. Like our criminal guys will call us the day ahead and say, hey, we got a buy bus going on tomorrow. Can y'all get the airplane up for us? So we kind of know those things ahead of time. We'll plan for them.
And how do you guys decide who works when? Do you guys bid like seniority based, or how does that work?
No, we have kind of a tentative framework of a schedule. And so then in my particular base, it's a small group of guys. It's only 5 guys. And so they'll put in, say they want to take a week's vacation. And so we'll put that on the schedule. Or if, let's say Monday comes up and they're like, hey, I'm working Friday, but I really don't want to be here. So they'll just swap with one of the other guys. Hey, can you take my Friday? I'll take your Thursday. And they're only work on average 2 days a week anyway. So like this week, one guy may work Monday, Wednesday. The next week he may work Sunday, Saturday. It's just all depends on what the needs of the schedule are and then what the individual pilot's needs are. We try to work with everybody to kind of help them make as many family events and all that kind of stuff as they can.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
When you're on call or in the hangar, 80% is going to be rotor wing. Or it sounds like is it like 80-20? Is that about how it works?
Yeah.
Or?
At my particular base, that's correct. Now, we have another base that doesn't do medevac. All they do is law enforcement. So you could probably flip that upside down. They're going to be 80% fixed wing and then 20% rotor because most of their missions are going to evolve around searches or helping the criminal guys. But the bases that have the medevac portion to them, it's 80% helicopter. Yeah.
All right. I know every day is completely different and
Sure.
you never know what's going to happen. You get to the hangar
Yep.
at 8 o'clock. Walk us through a typical day, if there is such a thing as a typical day.
Yeah, sure. So at 8 o'clock, the off-going pilot's going to give a shift brief, if you will. Hey, I flew the helicopter and everything was good, or I had this issue or whatever. Then the pilot's going to do his pre-flight, just like any other pilot does. And he gets, we call it the helicopter being cocked and locked. He pre-flights it, he gets it ready to go. So when the phone rings, he just pulls it out and goes. So once he gets the pre-flight done, he's at the hangar. He's just waiting on the phone to ring. My particular agency, we do very little proactive. Everything we do is mostly reactive. In other words, we get a request for service. We don't just go out and patrol. So once he gets the helicopter pre-flighted, he's hanging out, waiting on the phone to ring. Typically, like I said, we'll average about 2 to 3 calls a day. So let's just say a typical call, he'll get a call for a car wreck on the interstate. So he checks the weather. The weather's good, gets the crew. They pull the helicopter outside of the hangar, start it. And usually from the time the phone rings to the time we take off, we shoot for 7 minutes or less. So he'll take off. Our average flight time is going to be about, say, 20 minutes to the scene. He'll land. Sometimes he lands right in the middle of the interstate, picks up the patient, takes the patient to the hospital, drops them off, comes back to the hangar, refuels, post-flights, and gets ready for the next call. Or if it's not a medevac call, it may be a search call. Those tend to run a little longer depending on what's going on. But if he gets a call for, hey, we got a missing kid, a 7-year-old's ran off, then he takes off, same deal, takes the crew. They go to the search area and they'll start searching with the aircraft until they find them or exhaust all assets.
So how long can you search for from a fuel standpoint?
2 hours. Yeah.
And then, if you start running low on gas and say you're tracking some dude or whatever, and you get bingo fuel, can you go to just any of the local airports that's closest and land, and will they all hot fuel you and just blast off again?
Yeah. So we know where all the local airports are. So what we generally do on a case like that is when we're getting close to our bingo fuel, we'll call our dispatch, and especially if it's in the middle of the night, we'll call dispatch and say, hey, can you call XYZ airport and let them know that I'm going to be there in 30 minutes for fuel. And then they normally will, when we land, they're there waiting on us. They'll hot fuel us. We take off and we'll send us the bill. We'll pay you. Checks in the mail kind of a deal. so we'll take off, and that way we can stay on site. A lot of times if we have the weather, if we get out on some of these searches and it looks like it's going to be something that's extended, let's just say, like we got some guy that's just shot a couple people. So obviously it's a high priority to catch that guy. Or let's say we've got a 5-year-old that they can't find. Obviously that's a high priority for us. So we will send the helicopter out initially, and then we will follow that up with a fixed wing. So the helicopter will do the initial search, do the low level stuff. The fixed wing will come in with the infrared camera a little higher to do a more of an overview, and they can obviously stay on station longer than we can as well. So it all depends on kind of what's going on and what we think our chances are of finding or catching somebody, what assets we'll put on it.
So that would be like the reserve dude that then came in and picked up the airplane and blasted off to then relieve the helicopter. So you always have eyes on it. And
yep, exactly.
Keep
or
it
it could be, I mentioned the base we have that's law enforcement only. Sometimes we'll call those guys and say, hey, can y'all just start heading this way? We got a missing 5-year-old. Obviously, we got to get all hands on deck for that. And so they'll start responding in the 206, and they could be anywhere in our state within about hour 15 minutes. So it works pretty good that way.
That's interesting. So you mentioned only working a couple of days a week. For maybe some pilots that are listening, they're going, well, can you do stuff on the side on the other days? Or like, how does that work? Can you fly airplanes or helicopters for somebody else?
Or even like pick up trooper shifts or something?
Yeah. What can you do on those days that you're not working?
Well, I can tell you what they're not going to do is pick up trooper shifts, because troopers work way too hard. Yeah. They actually have to talk to the public and deal with the public. We're at 500 feet, so we just look at them.
Yeah.
That's like an airline pilot being like, yeah, do you want to pick up a shift being a flight attendant on your days off? Because it's like they have to actually deal with everybody and do all of the hard stuff.
Yeah.
We're like, no, exactly. That's like a real job. We don't want to do that.
So yeah, that's interesting. So a lot of our guys do what we call per diem flying on the side, especially because of the helicopter training. None of our guys fly any private medevac that I know of. Like I've flown for some companies in our area that have helicopters, and other guys have too. Over the years, I've managed twin engine airplanes. I managed a Cessna 335 for all our twin Cessna aficionados out there, which is a 340 minus pressurization. Cessna only built them for like 2 years, but it's the exact same plane. It just doesn't have pressurization.
That's probably good, because wasn't that one of the big problems with the 340 was the pressurization system and the turbo system and like all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think so. It was a sweet little plane. It didn't have pressurization, but the big thing was it didn't have air conditioning, which was that was tough on the 90-degree days when you're taxiing.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, you can do per diem flight. I actually, a few years ago, kind of getting closer to retirement, and I thought, well, what am I going to do when I retire? So I started kind of investigating flying bigger aircraft, if you will. So I started looking around and ended up flying for a regional airline. And I was able to work my schedule with this particular regional, and with my state agency, I was able to work it out so that I could do both jobs at the same time. Kind of met myself coming and going a lot, but yeah. it worked out pretty good. And so, yeah, I've been real fortunate to do that. And I just recently, I'm getting ready to get start a new job with one of the major airlines, and I'm going to continue to work with my state agency for a little while longer. I'm eligible to retire now, but I'd like to stick around. And my boss has worked with me and said, yeah, as long as you can do it, make it happen. So yeah, that is a possibility. That's one of the nice things about having the 24-hour shifts like that, is it really frees up a lot of your time. So, I mean, when you can work 24-hour shifts, you're knocking out almost 2/3 of a work week in one day. So you're able to knock out a lot of that stuff.
How often in a 24-hour shift will you just hang out and not get a call?
Like I said, we average 2 to 3 flights a day. I won't say it's often, but if I was to ballpark it, I would say probably 20% of our shift, the phone never rings. So you're just sitting there for,
just knocking out some Netflix, huh?
Yeah, playing whatever, knocking out Netflix, working out, taking naps, which my wife, she first found out that she's like, you have a job where you can take a nap? I said, no, honey, it's a safety nap.
Yeah.
I said, I have to be prepared if I have
to. It's legal rest.
That's right, legal rest. So, but it does come in handy when the phone rings at 3 a.m. and you have to jump up and go from dead sleep to 7 minutes, you're lifting off in a helicopter.
I was going to ask you about that because our friend flew fixed wing medevac and he goes, man, it just seemed like the phone, it was always like midnight and on, seemed like when the phone rang. Do you feel like in that 24-hour shift, the majority of the flying is at night? Is it pretty balanced? Like, how does that work?
It's a hodgepodge. You just never know. You can almost set your watch by the first of the month when everybody starts getting their government checks or their paychecks. And if the first of the month falls on a Friday, nobody wants to work that weekend. We joke, everybody's got money for beer and gas for their four-wheelers, which is a bad combination. So funny. Yeah, and you heaven help us if the full moon is that weekend, because you can.
That's a real thing, right?
It is a real thing. I'm telling you, man, it's crazy when it's a full moon and people got money in their pocket. But in all seriousness, we see a higher call volume like in the summer months, when people can get outside and they can ride four-wheelers or they can go hiking or they can get on their motorcycle. In the wintertime, our call volume will drop off, not tremendously, but we'll lose probably 30% of the call volume just because, people are still probably drinking, but they're getting drunk in their living room, falling off their recliner, so they really don't need it.
Somebody else.
So you're saying most of the calls are because people are getting drinking and out doing stuff and hurting themselves versus like causing trouble and starting fights or shooting somebody and running off or whatever?
Yeah, well, there's always the family reunion where people are shooting each other and stabbing that we do. But I guess a kind of a sad thing, a lot of the flights we do are involved with alcohol or, drug abuse, people using drugs. And that's okay till you get on a four-wheeler and think that you can be Superman, or till you get on a horse or a boat. And then the next thing, you mix the alcohol or the drug use with a motor vehicle, and it's usually a bad outcome.
Right.
So,
what's the most fun for you to go on? Is it to find bad guys, or what's the call?
Like the pursuit.
That's what I figured.
Pursuit going down the interstate. That is the biggest thrill. Of course, we'll get the call and then we take off and launch the helicopter. Here's this guy. I mean, he's just running down the interstate as fast as he can, thinks he's going to get away. And then here we show. It's like, well, you ain't going to outrun me, buddy.
I think it's got to be fun too. Like when you're a guy that's running like through the woods or whatever, and you find him and you hover over him real low and you're like on the loudspeaker, like, stay still. That would be.
That's right.
And you're just like blasting him with rotor wash. I think that, and they got the big light on him and stuff. That's got to be awesome.
The most fun I think I've ever had. Here's the pursuit. I'm overhead. The guy bails. He pulls offside the road. He bails out of his car. Canine guy's behind him. So the canine guy opens his door, lets the canine out. And so I'm overhead. So you can imagine I'm overhead ordering. Of course, I'm flying the aircraft, but I'm watching. Here comes this canine. I'm like, whoa, this is like about a 3-second intercept here. And the canine just nails the guy and knocks him to the ground. You're like, mission accomplished.
That's awesome.
How long have you been in like a vehicle pursuit for?
Oh, they're usually fairly quick. I've had some go as high as like maybe 30 minutes. But yeah, they're generally more in the like 8 to 10 minute range. But it really helps. Most of them end in somebody bailing out, taking off running. So it really helps if we're overhead when that happens, because we can see the direction they're running in. And then, like I said, with the helicopter there, they tend to kind of hunker down a little bit more than they do just keep on running.
I would totally get out of hand with that loudspeaker. So, I will land on you, sir. Do not move. I will put this skid through your chest. Do not. If you run, we will shoot you from this helicopter. Do not.
That's right. That's right.
Fun.
Yeah, you can't say that. No, you can't say that.
I know. That's why I would get fired.
There's a reason Max, it's probably better Max is not a law enforcement pilot. I think it's probably for the best for everybody.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break from our interview with John to mention to all those professional pilots with all those gobs of money coming in from all the airlines and their new contracts. I got a question for you. You're getting 19% direct contribution. Are you smart enough to manage that much money? Especially if you're going all the way to age 68? I don't know. I'd bring in a professional. Of course, I'm talking about our friend, certified financial planner Tim Pope, who's been helping professional pilots nationwide create and execute a smart financial strategy. Timothy P. Pope, your financial planning partner for all phases of your financial flight. Check the show notes for a link to book your free appointment with Tim. Oh, you know what I just thought of? Tim's going to be in favor of age 68, right? Or no? Or does that even matter?
Why would he be in favor of it?
I don't know. I guess the clients are going to be with him longer? I'm not sure. Let us know, Tim.
All I have to say about Tim is another one of my quotes I just remembered. Do what you do, which is fly jets. Let Tim do what he does. So if you're worried about the money, go pick up another trip and then hire Tim. period.
There you go. All right, back to John. You talked about you getting close to retirement. You're still a pretty young guy. Can you talk a little bit about how that works? What's the length of service? What are the commitments that people make when they're going to do law enforcement flying?
With my particular agency, we have 25-year retirement. So you can retire after 25 years of service. Most guys, if they start young enough, they'll retire just about the time they hit 50, which I'm getting ready to turn 50 in 3 months, I guess. That's when most guys will check out. Some guys might stay a little longer, but yeah, that's the one of the big benefits to the job is you get a retirement, which is kind of going by the wayside these days. What they call the defined benefit retirement, which is I draw a check every month as long as my heart's beating, no matter what the stock market does. And then the state also gives us a supplement to our regular retirement, which is basically equivalent to about what Social Security would be. So if we retire at 60, we get that supplement until our full Social Security kicks in. So it's not a bad gig. I mean, it's not 100%, but it's still pretty good for 25 years of service. And then, like I said, it's just really cool. You know, in my particular situation, I feel very blessed to have been able to do this law enforcement aviation. But then at the same time, now I'm able to transition to a completely different part of aviation, which the 121 world is completely different than flying a helicopter by yourself at night in the mountains. And so, it's really cool to kind of be able to experience both extremes, I guess, if you will, of aviation. And I'm able to do that, like I said, because I can retire at a relatively young age and I still have 15 years before they kick me out of the airlines.
Is there interagency or like federal jobs that you can qualify to apply for as a law enforcement pilot? Can you move up the ladder in a different way if you didn't do 121?
Well, there's Customs and Border Patrol, and there's several federal agencies that have law enforcement aviation, but the federal agencies, I think the age cutoff for those guys is 37. You have to start, I think, by the time you're 37 because they have like a mandatory retirement at 57. So like within my agency, there's opportunities to move up in the ranks. Me in particular, I'm actually what's what they call a base commander, which would be a chief pilot in 121 terms. So I supervise my base and I have the 5 pilots that work for me. And so I'm kind of in charge of that facility. And if I wanted to, there's a couple more I could move up, like to be like an assistant unit or division commander or / training officer, or then there's also the division commander role. I never moved up or looked to move up to those positions because it would have required me to move across the state. And I just really wasn't interested in. I got into aviation because I like to fly. And I have about all the paperwork / administrative duties that I care to have right now. So the higher you go up in rank, as in both jobs, the more duties and responsibilities you have that take you outside of the cockpit. So,
right.
Matter of fact, I told somebody the other day, the 2 best things about 121 flying is how many people I supervise? 0. What my responsibilities are when I walk through that jet bridge? 0.
That's what I always say. One of my favorite sayings as an airline pilot is, you know what that sounds like? Not my problem.
Exactly.
Captains love it when you say that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking forward to that. I used to say that all the time as an FO, and then when I became a captain, I'm like, oh crap, that is my problem.
It's so liberating to just be like, I show them a picture on your phone. Hey, I found this on the walk around. Let me know what you decide to do about that. I'm going to go get some coffee.
I know, exactly. Yeah, and it's always on go home leg. Really?
Or they ask you stuff, and I'm like, I don't know, man. That sounds like some of that Gee Whiz Captain stuff. I don't know. I don't get paid to do that.
That's right.
And they always like, oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
But a lot of our guys, they'll retire. They'll do different things. Like we've had several guys retire and go to the FAA as inspector. And we've had some guys will retire and they'll go work for a private Medevac company. And that was one thing when I decided to go with the regional airlines, kind of felt like I had checked the box with helicopters. I mean, I love it. I've done some really cool stuff with helicopters, but I really didn't want to go to like a private Medevac company, basically just change colors of my flight suit and do the same thing.
Right.
So I really wanted to step outside and challenge myself and do something different. So that's the reason I chose this path. But like I said, some guys will choose corporate helicopters, or they might, like I said, do the private Medevac.
All right, John, we've come to the end of the interview, and it's that time when we ask for a good story, and you got to have.
I am going to request a good fixed wing and a good rotor story if you can do both.
They have to be G-rated?
No.
Okay. So I do have a couple of good stories. So Probably one of my favorite stories is, and this has been several years ago. I was working one night and we had several days of rain and we were having floodwaters and a lot of our rivers had kind of got swollen. So we're sitting there, it was dark. And this was actually prior to NVGs too. So we were flying unaided back in these days. And so we got our call and said, hey, we've got a typical car is trying to drive across a flooded bridge. And the car got swept downstream. The guy that was driving it, he's got out and he's clinging to a tree and we can't get to him. Can you guys come and rescue him? Sure. So we're all hyped up. I got my crew. We get our rescue equipment. We get in the helicopter. The rain had kind of slacked off, but it was still raining a little bit. And I'm like, we can do this. This is going to be challenging, but this is going to be great. We're going to save this guy's life, right? So we take off. We go to the area where he's at. We survey the scene. So, yeah, I can get down on that tree. We could put the rescue basket down and rescue him. It's all going to be good. So we did. I came to a hover over top of the tree, and the guy was literally just hugging this tree limb. So we got the basket down to him. He jumps in our basket, right? So we bring him up in the helicopter, put him in the helicopter. And my medical crew said, hey, we need to check this guy out. He may have some injuries. Let's land. There's an ambulance down there. So we landed in this field with the ambulance, and there were some deputies and a bunch of people down there. So medical crew rushes him over to the ambulance, and they're checking him out. I shut the helicopter down and get out. I'm talking to the deputy, right? I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool. Glad we got to save this guy's life, and he would have been in a bad way. So 10 minutes goes by. My medical crew comes out of the back of the ambulance with the guy. Says, yeah, he's fine. He doesn't need to go to the hospital. We're good. The deputy looks at me and says, hey, I got warrants for that guy. You're under arrest. And I'm like, okay, I just risked my life for a guy that was wanted. And I said, you never know. He might find Jesus one day. And he might be the next Billy Graham. But yeah, that was pretty awesome.
Pretty funny.
So,
one of my favorite, when we used to watch Cops in college, my favorite part of the show Cops was the bull session / debrief after the event. And I gotta imagine, it sounds like you do the same thing, shut the helicopter down and have the little, what actually happened here, the little debrief. Is that pretty?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We love to do that, especially on scene. Cause of course we're all police officers at heart and we like to chew the fat with the other guys. And we don't get to do that a lot at 500 feet. So yeah, whenever we can shut the helicopter down and go do our thing. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I got another story. Okay. This is another helicopter story. The particular area that I live in, the terrain and topography is very conducive to growing marijuana. All right. So we used to spend a lot of time hunting marijuana down in our area in the summertime. Now, of course, it's legal in most states, but for some reason, the federal government still funds the program. I haven't figured that out yet because like in my particular state now, everybody can have up to 5 plants each. Right. So when you find it, you're like, okay, not only do we have to find it, but then we got to count. That's either they have 6 because they can have 5. But anyway, back in the day, we were hunting the marijuana. And the way that our operation works is we would have a spotter in the helicopter. We would go out. Once we found it, we would have a ground crew that was stationed somewhere within, say, 15 or 20 minutes. And we would call the ground crew and say, hey, we got a bingo down here on Maple Lane. Can you guys come up here? And then we would guide them in and they go to where the marijuana is at. And they normally just cut it, take it back, and then they dispose of it. Right. It's very rare that anybody that they're able to make an arrest because they start knocking on doors. And what do most people say? Nope, that ain't my marijuana.
Yeah.
I don't know whose that is. I don't know how that got there. So anyway, this one day we're flying around. We found a patch and it wasn't too far from a house. And there was a barn that wasn't too far either. So we called the ground guys. Hey, we got a bingo up here. Looks like we've got about 100 marijuana plants. And so we're hovering around waiting on the ground guys to get there. And all of a sudden I look over and the back door of the house swings open and a man comes running out of the back of the house with a machete. And he goes straight to the marijuana patch and starts chopping the marijuana as fast as he can. And he get an armful and he takes off and he runs and he throws it in the barn. Then he comes back and he get another armful. So I'm like, y'all might want to step it up a little bit. This guy's actually harvesting the marijuana. So when the ground guys showed up, here's the dude with a machete in one hand and an armful of marijuana in the other hand. So it was pretty hard for him to deny that was actually not his marijuana. So
this is broccoli. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
I tell you, being a cop, you've got to lose some sort of faith in humanity sometimes. Just like these people just do stuff. And you're just like, wow, this is actually real life.
Yeah, you do. I'll tell you an interesting fixed wing story. I was doing a surveillance in an airplane one day, and they had told us ahead of time, said, this guy is an old doper. He's very wise to ground surveillance. So we really need an airplane to follow this guy. So at the time, we had a Cessna 182, which was even smaller than the 206, and we didn't have a camera on it. It was just naked eye. We just followed. So we go up a couple thousand feet and start following the guy. And sure enough, he would stop at every convenience store. Like he would stop, he would stay there for 10 or 15 minutes. He would backtrack and then he would go back his other way, trying to see if anybody was following. And then right before he got to where the drop zone was for his drugs, he pulled over and he only stayed like maybe 10 seconds. Then he pulled right back out on the road. We get to the drop zone and they go to arrest him and he doesn't have any drugs on him. So I happened to think about, hey, this guy stopped like just for a few seconds before the drop zone. So I sent the ground guys back there. And sure enough, he had stopped long enough just to roll his window down and throw all the drugs over the guardrail because he was kind of getting nervous about, hey, somebody. And then when he went down there, he didn't have any drugs on him. But of course, we found him. And I had the ground guys, once they arrested him, I said, ask the guy if he knew I was up there. I'm just kind of curious. And sure enough, he had no idea that we were up there following him. So
wait a minute, with like open ADS-B and these apps, how do you guys avoid that? Because if I was a smart dude like him, I would just have that up.
Yeah, we have ways to block what we need to block. Let's just leave it that way.
He has a gigantic mirror on the bottom of the airplane. So when you look up, you can't see anything. What?
Yeah. But I don't know. They tell us that we can block our tail number and it's all, but then I read on Twitter, like the kid that's following Elon Musk's jet, and Elon Musk, and I'm like, well, if that kid can figure out how to follow Elon Musk, then they can probably figure out how to follow it.
Yeah, it's funny. I was flying the other day and the law enforcement helicopter was coming in and I had him on ADS-B on my screen on my airplane. I was like, yeah. I wonder if they turn that off, like when they need to or what?
Shadow mode. They turn it on the news channel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, you were flying the 182. You're just looking at, like, you didn't have like a spotting scope or anything?
No, we would go up and sometimes the agents, they would have like a set of gyro stabilized binoculars, but I never looked through them because most of those guys end up getting sick. So I'm like, it must not be too gyro stabilized. The other story now I was going to tell you, this was funny. We got a call one day to assist the ATF. They were tracking, guy was running guns. And they said, hey, this guy's getting ready to come up the interstate. Can you guys pick him up and follow him until we can get another asset? Because we think he's running these guns like a long way. So I'm like, sure. I said, we'll do that. I said, it's a little rough out there. It's one of those days where it's a little windy down low. So I'm like, can you guys send us a spotter up? Because I don't have anybody to go with me and I need to fly the airplane. They're like, yeah. So next thing I know, 3 ATF guys shows up at the hangar and there was 2 older guys and then one brand new guy. And I told them, I said, yeah, it's going to be a little rough today. And so they have all volunteered the brand new guy to go up because the older guys, I think they kind of knew, right? And so the brand new guy's like, yeah, I can do it. He was kind of being all macho. As I'm walking out the hangar, I grab a trash bag because I'm like, this is going to be interesting. So I throw him in the back of the 182. We're following this dude up the interstate. And remember, they're going like 70 miles an hour up the interstate, right? So I can't go that slow in the 182. So what do I have to do about every 3 miles? A 360-degree circle, right? So after about 30 minutes of that, this guy, he starts getting quiet. That's the first sign. I'm like, hey, everything okay back there? Yeah. And so I'm like, hey, so I hand him the trash bag. I'm like, hey, just in case. Well, it wasn't 5 minutes. He started making a deposit in the trash bag. And he made several deposits. And I'm like, hey, look, we got an airport like coming up. You want to just go ahead and land? You can get out. He's like, no, I'll never live it down. We got to keep going. So the young guy, he would not let me land. And I felt so sorry for him because it was a rough day. And he was in the back looking down. We were doing circles. The surveillance went on for about 3 hours. Oh. So, yeah, but he would not land. He's like, I'll never live it down. Those guys they'll ride me till the end of the earth.
I'll never live it down, but I can't keep it down.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. It's perfect, John.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's gold.
Well, John, we certainly thank you for the service you provide to the public. And I imagine that's got to be rewarding in a way, to be able to provide a public service for folks, provide all of these valuable search, rescue, law enforcement, all that kind of stuff. So it's got to be attractive for certain pilots. So hopefully someone's listening to this show and they think, maybe Max and I talk about it all the time, these alternate career paths. There's more than just the airlines. And it sounds like even you could do the airlines too, maybe potentially. So I think anytime we can bring to light a different path, that's really exciting. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, it is a very rewarding career. I mean, there's nothing more rewarding than finding a missing 7-year-old and reuniting him with their parents, or A lot of times when we do these medevacs, we'll have patients that'll come back like 6 months later and say, hey, I don't know if you remember me or not, but I was in the ATV accident and I just wanted to stop by and personally thank you all. You can't put a price tag on stuff like that.
That's cool.
Cool to hear. All right, John.
Did the felon you saved from the tree, did he come back and thank you?
Yeah, what did he have to say?
After he got out of prison?
No, but I hope he found Jesus in prison and he's a preacher somewhere out.
What was the bounty on that? Was there a reward? Did you dance the trooper?
Yeah,
you should have hit him up for the reward.
The funny thing is that I got the Superintendent's Award of Merit, which is like one of the highest awards we can get in the state police. And so when my boss is writing out the description of everything that happened, I'm like, hey, do you mind to leave out the part where he got arrested? Because it'll be like a spoiler.
Heroically saved an individual.
That's funny.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, John, good luck in training your next adventure. Thank you for keeping the folks safe out there and appreciate it.
Sure.
Thanks, John.
I really enjoyed talking to you guys. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
All right, Max, that is going to do it for number 78. You know, we always thank people at the end. You know who I'm going to thank is you, because you were basically produced this entire episode, and I really appreciate it. It's really incredible performance.
And like I said, Dylan, it's really taught me to appreciate all that you do, so
Yes.
I don't want you to get used to this temporary arrangement.
Yeah, I know how it goes. Thanks for getting John on the show. Thanks to our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy, Harvey Watt and Tim Pope for sponsoring the program. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. If you want to get a hold of us, it's info@215podcast.com, or you can send an anonymous flight advice form on the website. We will see you in a couple of weeks. Until then, remember,
Flexibility is the key to air power.
can you remain flexible from age 65 to 68?
It's going to take a lot of yoga,
It's going to take a lot of yoga on the overnight. Think about that.
a lot of Apple Fitness,
In the room, Fitness Plus, Peloton.
Peloton, yeah, Kendall Tool. Okay.
All right, see ya.
See ya.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.